I would like to say that on behalf of Agile New England, we are thrilled and honored to have you joining us tonight for this monthly meeting. We have a fantastic program. It started with Amy and Gary, Agile 101 sessions. In tonight's presentations, as you undoubtedly are aware, we are featuring Joe Justice, an idea that we had for some time. The idea was in part born out of the Agile conference organized by BU, was the leading book of world, I believe.
Yep.
Where I had the opportunity to share the stage with Joe. And without further ado, I'll give you Joe Justice. Joe, take it away. The floor is yours.
You're much too kind, Jose. You're much too kind. And I just got a message from Munwai. Munwai is here. Another wonderful community on the other coast. SF Babam is one of her many projects. So I do absolutely recommend making the time zone jump back and forth, having Agile New England folks invite SF Babam folks, and vice versa. Another wonderful community. I just saw she's here as well. And awesome to see you, Amy. And oh gosh, Nancy, fantastic.
Can I just interject? Moonwai is also on our public Slack, and anybody can join Agile New England's public Slack. There's information on the homepage to join it. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, Nancy. There's a lot of downsides to the way the world has evolved and changed, and there's a lot of upsides too. And one of the upsides is these thriving communities have figured out how to thrive even more outside any given region. And I'm so grateful for that, as evidenced just by SF Babam and Agile New England, among many others participating right here. I will update my background, my Zoom background, to try to share some information here. Ba-boom. That's me going into work. Elon Musk sleeps at the bottleneck. I don't know how many people really have even heard that before. And of the people who've heard it, I don't know how many believe it, but it's true. The richest person in the world has a sleeping bag and goes to different spots. I mean, this is like a lean practice lifestyle. To wherever is the bottleneck, Elon is working there. And when Elon gets tired, which Elon's very durable, eventually Elon will get in the sleeping bag and sleep, and then wake up and resume working at the bottleneck. And when that's not the bottleneck, that's when Elon moves.
Joe, can you hold up for a second? Can you hold up for a second? Pepe, can we swap the screen from your desktop to Joe's slides, or do you have Joe's slides, or how are we gonna make
Joe, are you going to present some slides?
I'd like to. Currently, another person is presenting, which is just fine.
Go ahead.
The agenda,
go ahead.
You like.
Take it. Yeah, go ahead and take it.
The floor is yours.
Oh, you're too kind.
Sorry for interrupting. Okay, there you go.
Thank you. Let's run this collaboratively. Someone told me we're agile. Let's try it. Okay, let me. Yeah, I've got some images and stuff. Boom. Maybe the briefest version of me. Hi, everybody. Thank you. I'm Joe Justice. I started agility stuff in 2004. My first serious job out of college as a software developer was one of the early adopters of Agile methods. And I was handed a book on my first day of work, Agile Project Management with Scrum, and told, read this, this is how we work. Well, Agile was so new then, like everyone was trying to figure it out, but at least there had already been a book. Thank you so much. Mike Beadle, Ken Schwaber. Read that, delivered. I was surprised we didn't have 5-year budgets. In fact, shocked in that we liked teamwork, although we didn't always work in teams, we were new. Then went on to consulting, and eventually I worked for Bill Gates at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And the work I was doing there in Agile was not primarily software. It was vaccine distribution of polio vaccines in conjunction with Rotary International. It was maternal, newborn, and child health issues, how to have more babies born healthy and survive. So this was our product backlog. And we did software as part of it. We had a platform called Grand Challenges that would accept huge amounts of money and distribute it to people who won essentially financial awards to try to make impact to these big world aspirations. So there was software involved, and it had to be encrypted and legal and international and handle large sums of money and high visibility, transparent automatic accounting. Like there were software problems that some of us can relate to, but the core work was not software at all. So Agile outside of software was natural. And I think the reason that was so true is because of what's written in this pink bubble here. Bill split projects, all projects, business projects, financial projects, also software platforms, into small sizes and executed them all at once with many teams. That is essentially the structure of Microsoft under Bill. For those of us with a software development background, that's multi-threaded execution, that's object-oriented architecture, that's basically APIs and microservices as the company. And the whole company is run that way. And it was completely disruptive. At one time, Bill Gates was the wealthiest person on planet Earth. I mean, it worked. It shocked other companies. And it's not quite agile. It's not necessarily about customer-centered design or even short feedback loops. But what it is about is massive parallel execution. And this is natural to Bill. And Bill seemed to like agility for those reasons, that we would split product backlog. We had actually methods for taking big challenges and splitting them into parallel executable work. And we could then share those, pull those across multiple teams. Bill didn't seem to care whether people pulled work or if they were commanded to do work, right? So I wouldn't call Bill an agilist, but Bill was a phenomenal, I think, object-oriented thinker about all work, not just software. And then I went to consult for the leadership team at Amazon. And Amazon has more than 3,000 teams executing in parallel. Jeff Bezos was the CEO of Amazon at the time. Bezos has since stepped down and is now primarily the CEO of Blue Origin. Bezos was CEO at the time. And this was when Bezos was very strict on team size. Never have a meeting where 2 pizzas couldn't feed the entire group. Like that was strict at that time when I was in Amazon. And it may still be, but I'm not in Amazon now, so I can't say. Not firsthand anyway. I believe it to still be true, actually. And the benefit of that is these teams could have a higher level of autonomy and decision-making rights and speed for innovation than if they were commanded and told what to do. It's not like Bezos would walk to the teams and say, you're going to focus on making an excellent online jewelry, gems, stones, watches, rings, buying experience. Bezos didn't have to do that. Instead, these teams would autonomously set goals and measure their business execution to them. And I think part of the reason that worked so well is these teams were small. When you have a team of 3 people or even 4, it's very natural to say, here's what I think we should do, and here's why I might be right, and here's why I might be wrong. And you can have a nuanced, detailed, collaborative, innovative conversation. When teams get to 6, and those of you who have seen the graphs on communication pathways, numerically have some concept of this, humans as a species like to elect a leader and say it's actually inefficient for all of us to discuss all of the ins and outs and our personal opinions. So let's just have this person who's charismatic today, whether or not they're qualified, but they speak loudly and they're tall. Let's have them tell us all what to do. And that's where you start to get the death of self-organization and decision-making rights. And humans do it naturally. It's a very natural phenomenon. And Bezos stepped around that by having small team sizes. And then I became a full-time employee at Tesla. And I was shocked. Some of you might watch YouTubes about Tesla. Some of you might follow the stock price because it's such an interesting story. It jumps up and then drops down and then jumps up again. It's entertaining all by itself. And if you hold on to it long enough, historically, people have made a lot of money. So it's profitable for some. If you follow that company, you've probably heard before people talk about how fast it is. I'd like to reaffirm that. The goal is, if you see whatever the bottleneck is, your goal is to attempt to solve it in 20 minutes or less. Period. No matter what it is. That's your goal. And it doesn't mean you can, but that's the accepted norm. And it's not like people yell at you if you don't, and it's not like you're alone. You work in teams. But that's the pace. Like, no known problem should survive 20 minutes. And Musk famously says, if you think it'll take 6 years, try to do it in 6 months. You'll probably fail, but you'll come out way farther ahead than if you'd stuck to a 6-year mindset. And that's normal in the company. It is so shockingly fast. And then the next comment many people do hear and say is, well, it's a burnout factory. You go that fast, you burn out. Musk has improved a lot. I do think it was a burnout factory. Musk has improved a lot. And now I actually found it to be incredibly fun, incredibly satisfying, very loving and supportive, and sustainable. There's still challenges like any company. Some of us are even stuck in a slow company and it feels like burnout because it's slow, right? But there's a lot of safeguards and safety nets in Tesla now to help you feel rested, accommodated, loved, respected. Part of it is it's so flat, and part of it is it's so easy to join teams and have a group to support you. That's what I'd like to show next. So this is how I teach hardware development. Yes, I've made a class like everybody else. That's what I do to make money. I do Agile hardware developer class. It's a lot of fun. Here's how teams self-manage in a company like Tesla. This probably just looks like a bunch of gray boxes. Let me say, and then I'll zoom in a little bit. If you've ever attended an open space conference, open space, where there's not necessarily an agenda up front, people show up and they have an agenda that's blank. It says conference room A, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. No plan yet. 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. No plan yet. 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. No plan yet. Then there's conference room B, C, D. And then it's like the corner of the Northeast hallway. And, there's all these by the coffee shop and the couches in front of the powder rooms. And, all these new spots come up if you've ever attended an open space conference. Tesla does that with areas of the factory. That's what these horizontal rows are. They're areas of the factory. And then open space conferences have what's called the law of 2 feet, where you use your own 2 feet to take yourself to wherever you think you could be adding the most value. And there's no time limit on that. And it's reminded all the time. So there's no shame, but they try to make it so there's no shame in a good open space conference. No, really, it's fine to leave even when someone's speaking. Use your law of 2 feet. And it's fine to walk in, even if you weren't there at the beginning. Totally fine. And they have a high level of decision-making rights and psychological safety, or they try to at a good open space. Tesla works the same way. You walk in and you can propose an agenda item. I think I see the bottleneck here. I think if we had better machine learning in these robots, we would have a far higher output of Model Y fenders. Model Y is the small SUV that's becoming the best-selling car in country after country. And if we can change the embedded software here and the valving system, so a hardware and a software problem involving design, I think we can have a more efficient heat pump. So you propose those, and those become agenda items. That's these horizontal rows on this group Agile board. And maybe you go to that area and try to work on it, or maybe you don't, you just propose it. And maybe someone shows up, maybe 1,000 people show up. There's more than 70,000 people working in Tesla now. And that's project management. That's that's it. I never ran into a central PMO operating the Agile program there. I never saw it. It was not a thing. How teaming worked was essentially open space. Okay, doesn't that sound like utter chaos? Couldn't people build anything? No. Here's why. There's a real-time financial metric that's measured by efficiency to Tesla's mission. And you can propose the formula. So it's not like the financial kings and queens say, here's how we measure your project. You can propose it. But it's constantly audited by anyone because everyone can see it. Anyone else can audit your financial efficiency formula. And what that says is, how do you measure your positive impact to Tesla's mission? And you have to have that. So that's often the first thing you do when you do this open space law of 2 feet. How is this going to help Tesla's mission? Then immediately, there's an autonomous measurement. Tesla has some really good machine learning. It's not like machines can do all the creative thinking for you, but they help everything. Like in software, remember when autocomplete came to our IDEs and how useful that is sometimes and now a lot of the time? Tesla has autocomplete in a lot of things now, like CAD and financial services and what we typically think of as HR. And with that level of autocomplete, you really self-serve almost everything. So that you don't have like a group you have to go to and wait on. You kind of do everything yourself. And with that level of autocomplete, it's pretty easy, really, most of the time. So you autocomplete your financial formula. These apps running on your phone and on the cloud all throughout Tesla and on laptops and cameras and televisions, then tracks who's spending what time on what. It's not like you have to fill in a timesheet. For California law, you do punch in and punch out because you're in a factory position. By the way, there are no office jobs. Everyone, including Elon Musk, builds cars. Everyone. So you are lifting 20 kilograms. You are getting machines unstuck. You're getting robots unstuck. You are programming robots. You're doing really advanced software development. And you're sweeping up metal filings and oil. Like that's the job. You do it. You use the law of 2 feet. And if the bottleneck is the ovens need to be cleaned for the enamels, you are climbing in the oven when it's turned off, when it's cool and safe with lock in and tag out. So you're doing hard work. There's no white collar, blue collar. It's not a thing. Like Elon Musk is drilling metal. Like that's how the company works. And so a lot of Agile coaches have asked, how do I get a job in Tesla? And so I tell them, and they say, oh, but that's not what I want to do. I want to talk. I'm like, yeah, that's not, I mean, you will do some, but that's not the only thing you're going to be doing. They're like, but I want a cushy job where I tell people how to be Agile. I'm like, that is not what I experienced in the Musk companies. So fine. I mean, people have different aspirations and that's totally cool. So you are definitely hands-on. Now you have this law of 2 feet. These teams organically form and reform at any time. You use the law of 2 feet multiple times a day if you choose to, if that's what's helpful. And these teams or these missions, these agenda items, have a real-time number of how much it costs to run that team in terms of the people working on it and what they need to be paid, all in insurance. There's great health insurance, etc. The square meters are really cubic meters of the factory you're using. What's the opportunity cost of the company to using it? The robots you're using, what's the opportunity cost that you're using those robots? The supplies you buy, the software licenses you use, the laptop you're on. And that's all automated. You don't have to calculate that. So you get this figure, it's OpEx plus CapEx. That added together, and the value of whatever you're producing, your attempt at measuring the value of whatever it is, whatever formula you proposed, is divided by the cost. You can see every agenda item's financial efficiency in real time. It doesn't mean it's perfect. I mean, your formula for measuring value might not be the right one, but anyone can try to propose a better formula And if it gets a majority vote, it's in immediately of whoever chooses to vote. So, I mean, it can change anytime with a very low bar. So you have an attempt at a financial efficiency metric. And if you're below average, if you're red, if the agenda item you're on is red, you should probably be considering using the law of 2 feet to go somewhere else, because at least right now, that's not the most efficient way to be spending those resources. So how does that work with long-running projects? Well, remember, Musk says, if you think it'll take 6 years, try to get it done in 6 months. Then the corresponding item is, when you know what the bottleneck is, or you think you do, try to solve it in 20 minutes or less. What that does is there's a bias towards test and learn. I mean, real agile, right? You know, hitting the compile key now to see what happens. And as long as you have fast rollback and a lot of safety nets and automated testing before anything advances, you know, gated check-in, that's actually a very safe way to develop. So you're encouraged to do that in hardware, in financial services, in hiring, in low typically BHR, in every aspect of the company. The end result is it's so fast that it's really exciting, and that attracts great talent. One of the people I was working with was a top graduate and had worked on Obama's re-election campaign. Whether you liked Obama or not, someone who worked at a very difficult to enter position that had global impact was sweating shoulder to shoulder with me and everybody else. So you attract some people that'd be very difficult to attract if you tried to. And the reason they're there is not because of the money. The stock is good enough on average. If you take it averaged over 5 years or 10 years, it's amazing. Many of the people I worked with were already millionaires, and they chose to work because they loved it. So you have a lot of people there because they love it and they love the speed. To try to finish the thought on speed. If you've ever listened to an audiobook at 1.5 speed or even double speed, maybe some of you do it even faster, there's a certain point where that speed becomes normal. It sounds normal. That's what the author sounds like, or that's what the studio artist sounds like. And if you ever accidentally hit single speed, it's shocking. Everything's so slow. You're like, why are they speaking so slow on this audiobook? That's what happens when you work in a Musk company. It's so quick that now that I do collaborate with a lot of other companies, you can see problems tens of kilometers away or hours away because they come so slowly. it's like playing the game of life on easy mode. But I think that's only because of the bias towards speed and intolerance for waiting. With that, I'll pan out to an overview of where I spent most of the time working, the Tesla Fremont Factory and Design Center. This is an aerial photograph provided by Clean Technic, and it's actually quite accurate. It's not perfect, but it's quite accurate as to what actually happens where and why and how. And I've overlaid it with Agile games to try to explain what is agility in stamping and casting and dies and supplier contracts or plastics, or how does estimation happen at SpaceX for things like the Starship rocket, the largest rocket ever made by humans, et cetera, et cetera. I've put these games on it. You can see this, and I've gave an introduction on how teams form, which is not that different from open space. We didn't call it open space, but open space is very similar to what I experienced in Tesla. With that, I'd actually like the community, Agile New England, and the other participating communities like SF-BABAM to drive this conversation. If you want to ask me something, cool. Or if you want to talk to each other or teach us, cool. I'm open to learning. But I'd actually like to ask people to chat or take the mic.
Just a reminder, you'll have to take yourself off mute. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, Marcel.
It's Marcel.
David's got a hand up, probably next. Maybe we've got
Sure. Okay. I was just wondering how you got to introduce open space into Tesla.
I didn't. That was there when I got there. Was that the whole question? Or did you
Yeah,
have?
that's fine. That's just curious. I'm an open space facilitator, so I was curious.
Good for you. Good for you. Well done. So how it occurred is I met some of the Tesla team in 2010 when they were trying to get the Roadster to work. They had some Roadster sales, but they still were having issues of an entirely new product. They weren't awesome yet. Elon Musk later apologized to the first Roadster customers, saying, thank you for bearing with us while we rapidly iterated the Roadster. I mean, the Tesla teams would go to customers' garages after they'd already bought and received the Roadster and make changes, like super agile, but in some ways out of necessity. And I met them then. And then I talked to, I guess I could say I consulted, but I really think that just means talked to the teams and had conversations with them when they were making the chassis, the frame of the Model S luxury sedan. I showed them more levels of hardware modularity because that was my specialty at the time with my own company, Wikispeed. Then I did set up a Scrum training in Tesla a few years later. I think it was 2016, right around there. I've got it in my calendar, but I think it was 2016. And Jeff Sutherland actually taught it. And almost no Tesla employees took that course. I was really confused by that because I do think Jeff is a very talented instructor and can be very charismatic too. So I wondered why didn't that take? And then I became a Tesla employee and operated Agile at Tesla in 2020. And I was surprised to see no Scrum. I couldn't find it anywhere. It doesn't mean it wasn't there somewhere, but I could not find it. And I went, okay, I did go everywhere. I do believe there's zero Scrum in Tesla. So I started using some Scrum to launch teams because it's easy. It takes 2 days to learn. There's only 3 roles or accountabilities now. And I didn't have a hard problem with it. But I found teams would discard Scrum almost immediately after booting up, and they didn't slow down. They just sped up. And this is where I was completely shocked because I had been in the Scrum domain for 6 years. And I saw everything as Scrum. Anytime I saw someone taking a financial decision, I assumed it was a product owner or a chief product owner or a product owner team. You know, I had these lenses, right? And being in Tesla, I realized there were no product owners. There were no Scrum masters. How is this working? And Marcel, to your point, they didn't call it open space, but what they already had was absolutely extremely similar to open space. And that solved for a lot of the same needs. So I'm a fan. If you're a skillful facilitator, thank you so much. Please continue to help many, many companies.
Right. Thank you for the answer.
Totally.
Yeah, it's David's turn.
Okay.
Yeah, David, you've had your hand up for a while. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Well, if I use an electronic hand, it doesn't get painfully stiff. But actually had 2 questions, but I'll ask the first one. Both are on the chat. One thing is, joining a meeting, while it's going on, and that keeps happening. I've been in a private pilot, and I know the term, quote, getting the picture, which is a length of time when one air traffic controller relieves another, and it takes them a while before they get the picture on the radar screen, and they know it, and they say, okay, got the picture. Now, if you walk into a meeting, it takes a while to get the picture, and if people keep on doing it, there's a lot of downtime or wasted time with lots of people sitting there and haven't got the picture yet, and it would seem to slow things down. So what of it?
David, you hit on one of the 5, I think, core reasons that the Musk companies seem to be able to make this work. What sounds like racing at the edge of chaos. You hit on it. You hit on one of them. It's this concept called walk up simple. Mm-hmm. And the idea is never have a meeting, period, ever. Just don't even have them. I never saw a meeting. I was never in a meeting. I never saw a presentation. I was never asked to make a presentation. And I was in as close to a pure play thought leader position as you can get there, and I still didn't. Instead, the culture, the wish, is if you're going to talk about something, which you need to do all the time while you're working, because you're almost never working alone. I mean, it does happen, but you're usually in groups or swarms or pairs or mobs. We did a lot of mobbing or ensemble of everything, not just programming, like mob robot programming, mob robot loading, you know, all that. Okay, so whatever you're going to communicate about, which typically would be a meeting in most companies, the goal is to do it within touching distance of whatever machine is involved and whatever materials are going to go in or come out of that machine. Now that's kind of weird, because what if it's software? What's the machine? Well, what is that software going to run on? Is it going to run on the autopilot stack? If so, there's a physical set of awesome circuit boards that the autopilot stack runs on. Or is it going to run on the chip that adjusts the lumbar support in the seat? Okay, well, you better be by the machine where that chip is made, or if it's supplied, and it was a supply chip actually, by the area where that's put into the controls of the car to control the seat. What that does is immerse you in so much information, keeps you connected to the actual work, and it makes it more walk up simple. So you walk up and you more quickly get the picture. Now, the next part of that is walk up simple is so important that very often there's tape wrapped around a pole. Like, I mean, you use anything that's there, but I mean, there are poles in Tesla Fremont anyway, behind me, where there's poles on a grid, and how you find things as often as you look at the grid number on these poles, because this is one of the largest enclosed spaces on planet Earth. I mean, you ride a bike to get somewhere and it takes a while. So you get there and use the poles as a grid to find like latitude and longitude. And then wrapped around the poles, there's often written in thick markers, so you can read it from a few meters away, definition of ready. Stuff that crosses this pole needs to be like this. Like if it's a chip, it needs to already know these things. And if it doesn't, we have to reject it, right? Because we're not equipped. So meet this definition of ready. And then there's usually the next pole, a few meters over, and with tape wrapped around, it says definition of done. If something leaves here, this is what we commit that means. And if something doesn't mean that, it's because we have an issue and we need help, right? And then that's very quickly, if not already, controlled by automation, which is a whole nother conversation. That's now the digital self-management part, which is one of the other 5, I think, key enablers of Tesla. And that's a whole conversation all by itself. But this idea of walk up simple helps people get the picture in a relatively quick amount of time. And the wish of walk up simple is in the shortest amount of time, someone who just walked up is meaningfully contributing. That plus mob or ensemble means you rotate through and you have people navigating or researching, or other pairs and groups supporting you. So in minutes, you're doing whatever the thing is with people helping. And that helps just destroy waiting, just absolutely crush waiting. I mean, really, most problems are solved in 20 minutes or less.
Who is next with the hand raised?
It looks
Lyra. Lyra next.
Well, I think my question has been indirectly answered from the last answer, but I'll just give you something that was passing through my mind. I'm thinking, like, what was the turnover or happiness level? Was that ever a thing to be measured? I hear you talking about measuring their success, with respect to the overall organization's, goals, like how did what they did help Tesla as a whole achieve the goals. So were other metrics like team happiness ever a thing? Because I know that's quite a thing right now in many agile squads. Like, was that ever measured? And with the getting things solved in 20 minutes, like, did that put pressure or was that stimulating? Did you ever measure like the effect it had on people who were working in these teams?
Awesome points there. Awesome points. Now, I do think the Musk companies in years before did lose a lot of skillful talent because it was just difficult to sustain. I think that may have been true. That was not what I observed by the time I got there. How to address what Tesla actually did and the way you asked your question. Tesla uses calling them employee surveys sounds too old school, but really that's what they are. Things like, how welcome do LGBTQ individuals feel in Tesla? That's one. Or they don't really do managerial effectiveness because there aren't really managers. It's extremely flat. There are people who hold those positions for compliance reasons, for legal reasons, but who's in that position rotates through, sometimes multiple times a day, sometimes every few hours. So there's someone as a health and safety officer, because you need that, but who that is that doesn't matter. It's whoever is skillful. So it's not like you get promoted. There's really no ladder to climb. Like you're just in the company and that's it. The bonuses are stock price, but that's another conversation. So there's surveys. I did not see one, or I did not request or orchestrate one that was happiness metric, like I did at John Deere, which became a Harvard Business Review piece. I didn't do that at Tesla. It didn't seem necessary. The culture already, as I experienced it, was so high on psychological safety and fast forgiveness. If someone was malicious or truly hazardous, they would be outed immediately. I mean, people would try to do it in a loving, respectful way, but the company would be protected from you, right? Immediately. Like if you truly did something sabotaging, you were immediately put in a position where you were not harmful, which usually means out of the company. But that was extremely rare. It did happen. I saw it happen, but it was extremely rare. Much more often, you're in these groups that are loving and supportive, right? There was a lot of positivity. Then the large surveys I've talked to, like how welcome do you feel as an LGBTQ, for example, a group that's often marginalized and fighting to feel welcome. Tesla has been ranked the #1 place for LGBTQ, for example, 10 years running. It's so welcoming, and people truly don't seem to care what you look like. they just want to know, are you contributing well? Are you emitting positivity? Right? It does not matter your background or life choices or political orientation or anything. But I did not run happiness metric retrospective, which is one of the pieces you asked about. It didn't seem necessary. And the burnout rate at Tesla is now extremely low. You have a lot of people who've been there many, many years now, and it continues to compound. Did I get anywhere near your question?
Yes.
Thank you, Lyra.
It's Brian Showmaker's turn.
Thanks so much for a really intriguing overview. One of the things I'm always concerned about, you've talked about workplace safety or safety within the, within the organization, but another key concern, especially in the medical device field that I do a lot of my work with, is safety of the actual product, the potential of the product to harm somebody. And certainly that's an important element in any kind of transportation design. And of course, he's doing his work in the Hyperloop stuff. He's doing the work in the vehicles. How is safety factored into the kind of rapid fire and flat level idea generation and so forth?
Brilliant, Brian. Brilliant. I love it. I will call it test-driven development. I think that's probably the right word. So in Tesla, any change that's being made, and it's constant. I don't think I've said this yet. I've said it in many other sessions, but I don't know if anyone here has heard any other session I've been in. There are hardware changes to the cars, new electronics, different airbags, different metals, different shapes of metals, about every 3 hours. if you compare that to BMW, that's 2.5 years for a minor model change and 5 to 7 years for what they would call a major model change. Same in Toyota, very similar in Toyota, very similar in Stellantis Group, formerly Chrysler, very similar in Ford. In Tesla, it's agile, right? So you truly have this fast pace of release. Any of those changes, the first measured criteria, and nothing is released unless it passes gated check-in. And by gated check-in, I'm using that software term because I think it works well, but this is for hardware, this is for a new supplier, including embedded software and apps and everything. So gated check-in, the first criteria is safety. And the measured bar is not what is the legal road legal required minimum. It's way above that. And as a result, several times different Tesla products have scored the highest safety numbers of any product of their type ever. Every time a Tesla has a fire, it's on the cover of every news outlet. The number of gasoline cars of the same model year, so new ones, like safe ones, relatively, like a 2022, or now they call it like what, 2024, even though you bought it now, gasoline car, for every 1,000 gasoline cars that spontaneously explode into flame, including in someone's garage, there is still not even one Tesla that has a fire, right? So the safety metrics are phenomenal. And the reason is test-driven development. Your safety tests have to be there first, and until they pass, and until everybody votes with near perfect confidence that the safety tests are appropriate, it's never promoted. The change is not promoted. Brian, did I get anywhere near your question?
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that I'm after. I mean, you hear all the time in the news about things like the completely software-driven, AI-driven models rolling through stop signs, and then something having to be stopped and so forth. But that may well be the phenomenon that you're talking about, that even the tiniest issue that takes place with these things is blown way up in the news.
Tesla is a great stock to make money because it moves up and down. And the media loves that. They like to pump Tesla and talk about how great it is. And then they like to talk about how awful it is. And sometimes it's not true on both ends. So no, the rolling stop issue was a non-issue compared to General Motors ignition recall event that cost many, many lives, for example. I'm not meaning to put General Motors under the bus. I'm trying to put it in an automotive greater context. Yeah, it's very attractive to pump good and bad, and it's done in cycles. It's interesting to see the media outlets run stories of positivity and negative in cycles, which directly impacts the short-term stock price. Over the long run, 5-10 year horizon, the trend is simply the same trend, which is up. It's actually very up, but you get this wonderful volatility that traders love. So the media enjoys that one. Great points, Brian.
So next up is Rebecca.
Hey, Rebecca.
Hi, how are you?
I'm awesome.
Good, good. I was passing your old WikiSpeed video around my office today. There were a lot of people that weren't familiar, young people that I work with. But so that was fun. That was fun. But my question is kind of following on what Lyra was saying. So when you're going at a pace like what you're describing, and you're very focused on sort of impediment removal and problem solving, I'm wondering if they're missing reflection. And I'm actually mindful of a team that I'm working with, because I have a team that is a really high performing team, and they're really good at sort of like swarm, triage, fix. But what I'm trying to get them to think is that pausing is useful. It allows for creativity. It lets you, sometimes there's problems that are really obvious that you fix, but then there are those problems that you'll just kind of get used to because you're running so quickly that it kind of runs out of your space. So I guess I'm wondering sort of two things. Like, one, how did you or did you not see that happening? And did you think that was a thing that was potentially missing there if it wasn't happening in a more structured way?
I love it, Rebecca. I've got an answer and a theory, and I'll try to be fast because unfortunately I have the next commitment at the top of the hour. I facilitated some retrospectives, but as far as I ever saw, I was the only one. I was the only one that introduced, I mean, that's a standard Agile practice that predates, for example, Scrum, but I was the only one running any of the events that I saw. So why did the company seem to be successful without that is then the theory. Here's my guess. I believe this to be true. If a company currently doesn't release new products from design, like all the way from let's make something, from the decision to missionize a project to getting customer feedback, if that takes longer than a year, they probably need some of the bigger ceremonies like big room planning and PSIs and trains. They probably need that because they're not at a year yet, you know, and things like Scaled Agile Framework have a quarterly cadence they try to get you on. And yeah, so that might help. By the time you're near a month from, hey, let's do this, to we're getting customer feedback, that's where I love the Scrum ceremonies, the 5 events and 1 activity of Scrum, like retrospective. They seem to fit, keep the energy up, keep the focus over multiple weeks. By the time you're releasing multiple times a day, CI/CD, it's a non-problem. I don't think you need to pause and relook because you just learned about that issue and decided to do it today. It's still top of mind. So I actually, my theory is it's a cadence, not cadence, because some of these things aren't on a rhythm. You know, reality happens and it's messy sometimes, but it's fast. And it's not like I have to keep in mind the overall issue if we're actually solving and putting into production at that cadence is what I believe to be true. If it's longer than 30 days, I think what I would traditionally understand as retrospectives, and the book Agile Retrospectives, Making Good Teams Great by Daniel Larson and Esther Derby, I would say that's needed. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In the interest of time, thank you, Rebecca, for the question. And I want to try to sort of like get to as many as we can. Gervais Johnson, your turn.
Hello.
Hey, Gervais.
Hey, I can remember you look much younger.
Awesome.
So I was going to ask, because this new career of yours is fascinating. I love it. And I know Elon, and I'm you know, neurodiverse like Elon. So how do you all like balance what you got to do? Speed is important, and thinking, deep thinking, to figure out what the frick we got to do and how to do it. How do you do that?
That's when we sleep.
All right. Doug, your turn.
Hey, Joe, you mentioned everybody contributes to building, but I would assume that, you know, some people, you know, you're hiring somebody as a chemical engineer who's a battery specialist. Does it make sense to have someone like that come out of a lab and, you know, pop some rivets or, you know, push buttons on a robot, whatever it takes? Is there truly, you know, pulling people out of specializations?
Well, I like the word choice you gave. I think that's important. There's no pulling by someone else. I mean, you self-pull. The law of 2 feet means you go where you think you would add the most value. So if you're thinking, and this is also maybe a better answer than when you sleep. I did mean that though. I mean, there's a lot of waking up and having a different comprehension or deeper level about something that happened the day before. I experienced that almost every single day. And I don't think I was the only one. So I was serious in that flippant answer, while you sleep. But another aspect of that is related to what was just said. Thank you. If you're a battery engineer and you're working on the chemical compositions and you think you're adding the most value you possibly could, if you set this down, you might lose your inertia or lose your train of thought. there's no one saying you need to leave, right? There's other agenda items that you can choose to look to if you want to, but you wouldn't even see those unless you went heads up, unless you looked at the agenda, right? Well, if you're truly wrapped in flow, contributing in a high value way, you're not even going to be looking up. So that's the other part. You would opt in to change. So you self-manage.
Thank you, Doug. Jerry, you had raise. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yep, thank you. I was just curious at Tesla communications, like you have new employees come in, how do they get up to speed on, you know, how like their team is working, or how they interact with other teams that are constantly making changes to how they work?
Totally. By joining the mob or the swarm or the ensemble, really, you join and learn from the people doing it there, what it is that's happening. Now, that's not entirely true. The walk up simple helps. So as you walk up, you can see a DOR, DOD, or sometimes there's a whiteboard and it says, here's what we think we're trying to do. And it's been erased and smeared 100 times. You know, there's the deep caked whiteboard ink behind it, sometimes by a hand because there was no eraser. But there's one written now that says, here's what we think we're trying to do. So you can see that as you walk up, that helps. But really just by joining. There is a 4-hour onboarding, or at least that's what it was when I joined. And then the apps that are put onto your phone, there was 28 apps that are installed on your phone at the time I joined. Those all help in different ways, but that digital self-management is a conversation all by itself.
Thank you.
Joe, it's 7:58, you have time for one more question?
Tragically, I really want to know what Susan has to say. Susan, can you be rapid? Oh, you're still
Yes,
muted.
I can be rapid. Yes, I can be rapid. Thank you. Dependencies, I can kind of visualize how some of them are handled by Ready, but how are other dependencies, how else are dependencies handled?
Awesome. I did not see dependency mappings like I have in other companies or like I've helped create in other companies. Why? Why did that seem to work at all then? The DOR and DOD helps, but also being there physically makes a visual set of information that I didn't have access to when I was working in an office purely on software, right? I needed some visualization, like some good UML or at least a whiteboard. But when you're in the factory, even if you're making software, you're sitting on the floor with a laptop. That's how software is written, like in the factory, right? Even that, you can see where things are going. It creates a visual sense, I think. This is my theory, because it does seem to work. I did not see any dependency mapping or do any dependency mapping, but you can see where your chip that you're trying to write software for is going and what that means, because you're right there. And maybe that's what solves for it. I'm not entirely sure, Susan, and I appreciate the question.
Well, Joe, thank you very much. I know that you have to leave at the top of the hour, and apologies to Sandhya and John Saleh, who wrote questions, but we couldn't get to it. We'd love to have you back. And again, thank you for joining us tonight, Joe. Any closing remarks?
Please tweet any unanswered or new questions I'm typing this as I say it, to @JoeJustice. I currently have 100% response rate on Twitter. If you use LinkedIn or Facebook, that's fine too, but I'm fastest on Twitter. So I'd love to take whatever the questions are, and please tag Agile New England so we can all celebrate as a community. Thank you, Agile New England, for letting me be part of tonight's event. It's my honor and privilege.